Well, obviously in 2025, a lot of the theme park focus is going to be on Epic Universe, as that is opening May 22nd of 2025. But something that I've often talked about and something I'm very curious about are the plans that Universal has in the existing parks, because I do believe, and I think they've already indicated this and kind of shown their hand here, that they are going to go back into the existing parks and update many aspects of those, given Islands of Adventure, or on the studio side, as we've already seen them announce on the studio side that Rip Ride Rocket is going away for a new roller coaster there. And I definitely think we're going to see more of this as they need to bring up, many aspects of the existing parks up closer to the level of Epic Universe. But of course, something that has been a huge draw for Universal and really changed the Universal parks has been the introduction of the Wizarding Worlds. And obviously, we're seeing a new one come to Epic Universe. But this video here from Attraction Ideas, I thought was a very interesting one, because it says, what is the future of Diagon Alley at Universal Studios? And I figured let's watch through this and react to it. And it seems like a lot of people have enjoyed these reaction videos. I enjoy doing them. I'm kind of more used to a show format where I kind of bounce ideas or talk about a topic somebody else does and vice versa. So it's like a virtual show here. I can kind of bounce off their ideas and talk about it here. And I enjoyed their videos. So again, I'll put the link to this video in the description, but we're going to react to this video and give some thoughts on it. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic, and we'll just get right into this.
The Wizarding World of Harry Potter Diagon Alley over at Universal Studios Florida is now well over 10 years old. And in those 10 years, the land has gone largely untouched, while the Wizarding World of Harry Potter land over in Islands of Adventure themed to Hogsmeade has gotten a whole lot of attention and a whole lot of love over its 15 years plus of existence, with the most notable addition coming just a couple years ago in 2019 with the addition of Hagrid's Magical Creature Motorbike Adventure. Whereas Diagon Alley, again, 10 years and nothing, which is rather surprising when you consider the fact that, of course, Hogsmeade over in Islands of Adventure has 4 attractions to its name, whereas Diagon Alley only has 2. And of course, one of those is shared with Islands of Adventure. Heck,
it's a good point, and that's something I've said a lot of times about Diagon Alley. I love Diagon Alley, but only having Gringotts in there. And I think out of all the rides at, part of the Wizarding World, I definitely think Gringotts is the weakest one. I think it's a cool queue, and I think it's a cool aesthetic, but the ride itself it's okay. I enjoy it. I'm not a huge roller coaster person, so I do enjoy it. I can ride it with the family, but it is one of those, comparing it to Hogsmeade, I think in terms of rides, for sure, Hogsmeade has Diagon Alley beat.
Even the new Harry Potter land, the Ministry of Magic land coming to Epic Universe, is going to open with the exact same amount of attractions that Diagon Alley currently has. So the question of the day, folks, is where are they going to expand this land? When are we going to get a new attraction added to Diagon Alley so it can actually be a land that stands on the same level as Hogsmeade and the eventual Ministry of Magic land over in Epic Universe? And you know what? I talk about the Hogsmeade land getting more love than Diagon Alley, but the bottom line is this. Over the last few years, Islands of Adventure has gotten a lot more love than Universal Studios Florida. Yes, Universal Studios Florida has actually gotten more attractions in recent years and more new additions in recent years than Islands of Adventure, but Islands of Adventure has gotten the big hitters. They've gotten Velocicoaster, they've gotten Hagrid's, and what has Studios gotten? They've gotten Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon.
I have never liked this ride. I'm not a late night person anyways in terms of the shows, but I remember when this thing first opened, we were there, and the wait was insane for this whole thing. And the ride is, it's just a very basic simulator that's silly. I've never been a fan of this one. I really honestly wish they would get rid of it and put something else in this spot that is, worthy of where it sits, because it's in prime real estate when you walk into Universal Studios. And it looks great from the outside. It fits the New York theme there, but I don't think the ride here is very good. And really, late night in general has fallen off, especially since they built this.
Fast and Furious Supercharged, Bourne Stuntacular, Villain Con Minion Blast, and the new DreamWorks land.
I will say the Bourne Stunt Spectacular is amazing. That is probably my favorite stunt show I've ever seen. We've seen it probably 5 or 6 times. Every single time is a great show. If you haven't seen it, go see it. I do love the Indiana Jones show over Hollywood Studios. I love Indiana Jones. I love stunt shows, but the Bourne show is absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it enough.
All additions that in the best case are fine, right? They're decent attractions, but they're not driving attendance to the park. And in the worst case, are actually horrible rides, just straight up terrible additions to the park and horrible attractions that really don't get much of any foot traffic whatsoever. And the point is,
I mean, Supercharged, I think, would fall right into that if I'm guessing. He might be talking about Minions too, but I think Supercharged for sure.
Here, that Studios is coming off of what you might consider a losing streak. They just can't get a hit. No matter what IP they use, no matter what attraction they add in, no matter what type of ride it is, doesn't matter. They simply cannot get a big hit that's actually going to make a difference at this park. And you want to know what's going to move the needle? You want to know what's a guaranteed win pretty much no matter what they do? A new Harry Potter ride. And if you think this is a new concept, you think this is a new idea that I'm proposing, think again. It's a complete accident, in fact, that we don't have an expansion to Diagon Alley at this point. There were plans, even from day one, to expand this park, but for one reason or another, they have constantly fallen through the cracks.
If I remember correctly, I think one of the rumors, at least, I don't know how far along it was that the Ministry of Magic was going to go, like, basically, if you look at Diagon Alley to the right, it was going to go into that space over there, kind of where the Fear Factor show is, and it was going to be a Ministry of Magic ride there. And then when they announced or were planning Epic Universe, they decided to put it in there. I think very similar to like Super Nintendo World. That was going to be something I think they were going to put on the studio side, and then they decided to make that part of Epic Universe. So there have been plans, but I do know at one point I'm pretty sure there was a Ministry of Magic aspect that was going to come to Diagon Alley.
In fact, there have been several plans over several years to expand Diagon Alley to the shuttered Fear Factor Live stage, which has been closed since 2020. Originally, there were plans to put a Ministry of Magic ride and expansion there. But hey, you figured it got moved over to Epic Universe. Originally, that land was supposed to be completely themed to Wizarding Paris, not just the outdoor portion of the land, but also the indoor portion. The indoor portion was supposed to be the Paris Ministry of Magic. But when the Fantastic Beasts movies blew up like an atomic bomb in Warner Brothers' face, Universal decided to scale back the references to that film franchise and figured that they had to include more from the original series of films in this land, thus bring over the British Ministry of Magic to this land. And in doing so, plans for an expansion to Diagon Alley that would be themed to the British Ministry of Magic fell through. Now, to be fair, that probably was a good thing because we're getting this huge, big, technologically advanced ride over in Epic Universe for the Ministry of Magic. Whereas, if it did come over as an expansion to Diagon Alley in that Fear Factor Live plot, well, hey, that piece of land is way smaller than what they have access to over at Epic Universe, so it would have had to be a much more scaled back experience. In fact, the original rumored idea was that it was going to be still using the elevator shaft as the main ride vehicle, but it would be more like a drop tower just moving straight up and down. Think of a Tower of Terror or a Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout style ride, but for Universal. It could have been very good, but I think it's hard to deny that having that greater amount of space allows Universal to build something a whole lot more elaborate and complex that simply would not have been possible had they added it as an expansion to Diagon Alley. But the buck didn't stop there. It wasn't like, oh, well, we're getting a new land in Epic Universe, so we don't need to expand Diagon Alley. It wasn't like, oh, well, we lost the Ministry of Magic, so I guess we're done with that idea of expanding Diagon Alley. Forget about it. No. Shortly thereafter, even just a few years ago, there was a rumor that they were going to still go ahead and expand Diagon Alley to Fear Factor Live, but instead put a ride in place where you get to ride a broomstick. Wow, that sounds awesome, right? Except, no, it probably would have sucked because it was actually going to be a VR broomstick.
I remember hearing about this. You've seen some attractions at some theme parks use VR because VR was being pushed pretty heavily. And I remember hearing about this, and as soon as I heard about it, I just remember thinking, I don't think that's a good idea, which I'm very glad they didn't go forward with it because I'm personally not a virtual reality person. I mean, some of it's okay, but I feel like it's a tech that they've tried numerous times over the decades to get going, and it just really hasn't quite caught on at least yet. Maybe it will one day, but I don't think at least mainstream, not everybody has a VR headset. So I feel like a ride that was going to be Harry Potter with a VR headset just seemed cheap. In my opinion.
attraction. Yeah, keep in mind, this Fear Factor Live plot, again, is very small. It's not a lot of land to work with. So again, dealing with that restriction, but still wanting to put in a high capacity ride that wouldn't result in stupidly long waits, given the fact that, it's a Harry Potter ride, it's going to be popular. You need something with high capacity. So, hey, let's go with VR because we don't need to build a huge amount of infrastructure for that. And we can go ahead and have a ton of seats available for this because, well, they could just all be sitting in one room, not having to go anywhere. It was certainly an economically sound decision, but holy cow, would it have made Universal look cheap, considering that you can obviously find similar attractions in arcades. Not even other lower tier amusement parks, literally arcades have VR attractions like this. I don't know why Universal ever thought this was a good idea. And in fact, they actually got so far in the process here, there were literally permits to demolish Fear Factor Live in 2022, but they ultimately pulled the plug on it. They canceled the project. They had second guesses about it. I don't know what made them gun shy about it. I'm certainly thankful that they did decide to pull it back, because this would have really been another stinker for Universal Studios Florida in this long list of recent additions.
I feel like they maybe asked somebody like outside the planning team or what, something, just mentioned it to some kid. They were just like, that seems lame. And they're like, hold on. Because I feel like a lot of times it's really easy. I could see how some concepts you're like, how does this come to fruition? And I think a lot of times when you're just in it, you can't see outside of it and you just get so involved with it. Maybe they presented it to some outside people. Maybe they did a study group and realized pretty quickly, oh, this isn't a good idea. Which, to their credit, I mean, they did pull that back. It's not often you see a permit for just, something to be demolished and that far, along the process to then decide not to do it. So to their credit, they didn't go ahead and do it, but I do think it would have been pretty cheap.
But that shows that even as recently as 2022, they were ready. They were raring to go as far as putting shovels in the dirt to start construction on an expansion of Diagon Alley. So it has constantly been on Universal's mind. They have been so close to actually executing on it, but they have pulled back time and time again. But with that being the case, we haven't really heard any sort of murmurs since then about a possible Diagon Alley expansion. Is it possible that Universal has actually at this point given up on the idea after getting so close to doing it and scrapping it time and time again? Not quite. The problem here, folks, is timing. Of course, we have a brand new Harry Potter land opening up in 2025 alongside Epic Universe. And
a lot of the resources and time and energy were going into Epic Universe. You look at Minion Blast, you look at DreamWorks Land, debate those whether or not those are good attractions or good areas. I think those are definitely targeting kids and much more in line with kind of what they're doing with like the Universal Kids Parks. Not a lot of money, trying to, gear it towards families. DreamWorks Land I'm sure didn't cost much money. It's fine. It's a better kids zone than what was there. But obviously the major money and the, I guess the teams working on things were working on Epic Universe, which does make sense that after, maybe as of now or like once Epic Universe is done, they then circle back in and start looking at the existing park. So that completely makes sense with the timing.
That's enough to satisfy Harry Potter fans and get them to return to Universal in a big way for a number of years. They don't need another Harry Potter attraction following that just a year or two afterwards, right? They can have a bigger gap between new Harry Potter attractions. We don't need one so soon after. But also keep in mind that Universal Studios Florida also has some other fish to fry. I mean, it's rumored that The Simpsons is going to have their contract expire with Universal in 2028, meaning that Universal would have no choice but to focus on finding a replacement for that prior to thinking about doing some sort of expansion to Diagon Alley, right? That's on their plate. Not to mention that Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket is reaching the end of its life cycle, given its age and its roughness. So that's...
Since this video was made, they already announced that Rip Ride Rocket is going away. This video is only I think a week or two, maybe 2 weeks old, something like that. But yeah, Rip Ride Rocket has been announced that it is going away in September, I believe is what they said, of 2025 to make way for some new unnamed roller coaster. We're talking about the Simpsons thing. The rumor there is Pokemon going in there. I do wonder if they take over into Men in Black area, and then between them and where you have Diagon Alley, you don't have much stuff there. So you could expand, the Wizarding World area up to, I guess it could take over Men in Black, but you could go up into Men in Black or something like that, and then if they do Pokemon, you could give them the Men in Black area and really make that space much bigger to really, incorporate that. That would be the rumors there. And I would assume the Pokemon or whatever's going in the Simpsons area would come before any expansion to Diagon Alley for the reasons that he said, because you already have a brand new Harry Potter land at Epic Universe. You wouldn't need to open one right away, but it would probably, I would say, be on like the second, third tier list or something like that.
Also something that Universal has to be concerned about in this park. And with those projects being sort of like front of mind for Universal, Diagon Alley and its expansion have fallen to the wayside, but they've not gone away. They're on the to-do list, but they're a bit further down the to-do list than they were a few years ago. So with that being the case, we certainly are still a few years away from a Diagon Alley expansion, but make no mistake about it, it's happening, right? They're gonna do it. As optimistic as we may be as fans, or Universal themselves may be, that the replacements for The Simpsons and Hollywood by Rocket may actually be really good, if they turn out to be stinkers again, then, you really need something Harry Potter that could be an automatic win for the park, because again, this park has not had any money makers or any mountain movers added to it in quite some time. So a Diagon Alley expansion, it's happening. I can guarantee you that it's coming. It will probably be a few years down the line at least, but it's gonna happen at some point, almost certainly. The question now is, where does it go? Well, you might say, well, of course, the obvious choice is Fear Factor Live. That's the spot of land that Universal has been working with. It's located directly adjacent to the land. And even to this day, even though there hasn't been any sort of movement to expand Diagon Alley, that theater is still left untouched, and it's only used during Halloween Horror Nights and very special and specific events. Otherwise, that theater is completely empty. It's completely abandoned 90% of the year. And yet they haven't done anything with it, which
I will say, if you have littles, when our kids were really little, you need to take a nap in the park, that's a great spot. Quiet back there. It's not too bad. I would put the kids in the stroller back there, have them take a nap. That's where I used to take them back there. And you kind of just chill out. And you can still go there and just chill out. But if you're looking for a nap spot with kids, still a great spot there.
which makes you think maybe they are still reserving it for an expansion to Diagon Alley. Again, its location makes it prime real estate to expand for Diagon Alley, even if the plot of land is relatively small. Now you may say, okay, well, one solution to this would be to also loop in Men in Black Alien Attack right next door as a part of the expansion. And sure, I guess that's a thought, but to be quite frank, that is far too much land. Keep in mind that both Fear Factor Live and Men in Black are built directly on guest pathways, meaning that you would have to expand the London part of the land, basically double the size of it, more or less, if you were going to go all the way over to Men in Black, making it both an non-economical use of land here, but also just far oversaturating Harry Potter in this park. Yes, we want to expand Harry Potter, we want to make it bigger, but we don't want to make it the whole enchilada here.
I would agree with that. I think Men in Black makes much more sense to make that part of, let's say they do get rid of The Simpsons, and that becomes part of, like, say, Pokemon or whatever they put there. Because I do agree, you don't want to make that whole, your whole end here of that side of the park would be Harry Potter. That's quite a bit. They're already tripling down into Harry Potter, but I don't think you want to make that much of a presence in an already, Studios isn't a huge park to begin with.
You're right. So you may be thinking, okay, I guess we're just kind of stuck with the Fear Factor Live plot of land. Yes, it's a relatively small piece of land, but we're going to have to live within those restrictions if we want to expand Diagon Alley. That's just the deal. Except there is another candidate that you are probably not even really thinking about, and that is the attraction located south of Diagon Alley, and that is Fast and Furious Supercharged. I know what you're thinking. This is still a relatively new ride. You just mentioned it as one of the new additions for Universal Studios Florida in recent years, and you're not wrong, but may I remind you that of these recent additions, Fast and Furious Supercharged is by far the biggest failure. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that at this point.
Family. Yeah, it's a terrible ride. Fast and Furious is already a ridiculous movie franchise. I've enjoyed some of the movies to various levels, but yeah, the ride itself, it doesn't even look realistic. And even the team members that are part of this, think it's a joke on some levels. And yeah, I think even Universal knows, because my wife, I was with her and did a sort of a guest survey. And I remember one of the questions was, what is the worst, in your opinion, what's the worst, attraction or ride in Universal Studios? And before she went to answer, they go, besides Supercharged, we know where it stands. So they even know themselves that this is not a great ride. And it's shut. Sometimes it's just not open either. So it doesn't have much demand. They need to do something with this, even though it is not an old attraction. It is definitely not aged well since 2018.
The attraction has been relentlessly panned as a horrible attraction since day one, both by diehard fans and the general public.
It's also just terrible CGI. Like, I played video games that have a better realism to it than on this ride.
Nobody seems to like this ride, and the wait time numbers seem to tell the same story, because the average wait time for this attraction, and this is going to blow your mind, is 19 minutes.
Oof.
Mind you, that is keeping in the time for the 2 pre-shows for this attraction, meaning that this ride, on average, is basically a walk-on for a ride that's supposed to be a major attraction in Universal Studios Florida's lineup. Is getting a walk-on. That's absurd. And yes, I know this attraction is only coming up on 7 years of age, but Universal's not been afraid to pull the plug early on attractions that they see fit to get rid of. I mean, one example is Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast, which only lasted 8 years at Universal Studios Florida before it was replaced by Despicable Me Minion Mayhem. Now,
I vaguely remember that. I used to kind of like Jimmy Neutron. I forgot that was there before Despicable Me.
to be fair, for Jimmy Neutron, it was not the case of it being super unpopular or just a straight up bad ride. It was still relatively popular when it closed. The problem was that Universal had struck gold with Despicable Me, and they wanted to get it into the parks as quickly as they could. So the way I look at it, Jimmy Neutron Nicktoon Blast was not removed because it was a bad ride or because it was unpopular. It was removed as a product of circumstance, right? It was removed because it was in the way of Despicable Me. Needless to say, Fast and Furious Supercharged has a whole lot more reasons to get rid of it sooner rather than later than...
And if you haven't ridden Supercharged, yes, in the ride, Vin Diesel is essentially Superman, and he's hanging off of helicopters, and it fits the movies. If you've ever seen those, given they started as I guess a street racing gang that stole car stereos, and now they essentially are government operatives with superpowers. I guess it fits, but I think for the general audience, it's a rather ridiculous ride. Even the premise is ridiculous. The ride is not executed well. But yeah, Vin Diesel is hanging off a helicopter there, in case you were curious there.
Jimmy Neutron did when it closed. But that's the thing. I'm not sitting here proposing that Fast and Furious Supercharged closes today.
I am. Close it now.
Saying it closes at 7 years old, and I don't think Universal would want it to close at 7
Disagree.
years old, at least not right now. Again, timing is everything here, folks, and Epic Universe opening in 2025 is going to bring a lot of new guests to Universal for the first time. It's going to bring a lot of guests who haven't been to Universal in ages back to the parks. So why not keep Fast and Furious open, since a lot of people have never ridden it? It's still going to get a decent amount of traffic in the coming years. Plus, you also have to keep in mind that if we are closing Rip Ride Rocket and The Simpsons in these next few couple years, well, you want to keep as much capacity alive in the park while those rides and attractions are being replaced, obviously. But you know what? When we're talking about Diagon Alley and its expansion, that timing works perfectly, because we already talked about how a Diagon Alley expansion is still a few years away because of the opening of Epic Universe. So if Fast and Furious Supercharged also is going to be kind of off limits for the next few years, then the two of these are probably on the same path to become available at the same time. So we're talking, maybe call it 3 years from now, call it 2028. I think that could be around the time when maybe they're thinking about putting shovels in the ground on a Diagon Alley expansion that would open probably 2 years later in 2030. And you know what might be available then, as it reaches its 10-year anniversary? Is Fast and Furious Supercharged. And here's the thing too, is that Fast and Furious Supercharged, that location, addresses like all the problems with expanding to Fear Factor Live. It's a way bigger plot of land. It's a huge show building, absolutely massive. It's absurd how big this is for such a...
The only issue looking at, you have the train station there, but I don't think the train station messes it up. But I'd be curious how they would do it, because I don't know if they would do I guess they could still do an extension of London, but he's not wrong. It is a bigger plot of land there. I just have figured at some point they would do something with the Fear Factor area, just given nothing is there other than what's there at Halloween Horror Nights. But he's got a valid point. I've actually never thought about that location, but good point.
Garbage attraction, but it's perfect placement and timing for Diagon Alley and Harry Potter to come into town. So they would not be restricted here whatsoever. Plus, when you talk about Fear Factor Live and potentially going all the way out to Men in Black and talking about how you have to have all those guest-facing areas, The great thing about the Fast and Furious Supercharged show building is that it's completely backstage. You wouldn't have to touch any of the guest facing areas, so you can still keep that whole area in front of the show building themed to San Francisco. You wouldn't have to change that whole area because the show building is completely backstage. And speaking of backstage, you wouldn't have to get rid of any backstage buildings to make this work. All you have to do is get rid of a relatively small and minor backstage pathway in order to make this work. And yeah, bada boom, bada bing, it's easy money. And here's the thing too, is that when this happens, where the Fast and Furious queue is, which is where Beetlejuice Graveyard Review was, you go ahead and put a new attraction there for the San Francisco land, right? Not all of this show building is going to be taken over by Harry Potter. Much of it is, most of it will be, but where the queue is for Fast and Furious Supercharged, you can easily enough put a small attraction there, whether it's another show or it's a small ride, maybe a flat ride, whatever it is, you can put something else in that spot. Which is why I feel like this is not even like speculation. I feel like this is such a surefire win for Universal to the point where I just don't see them going the other direction and going back to Fear Factor Live. It just doesn't make sense at this point. And that's the great thing too, is that you can leave Fear Factor Live to go alongside Men in Black. And when Men in Black's time is finally up, now you have this whole plot of land at the back of the park that could be used for a new land back there. The idea just keeps...
That's a good point. I mean, if you did that, that would free up both those areas. You could technically, if you put in Pokemon where the Simpsons are and that didn't take over Men in Black, you would free up space for a new land to come into studio side. Okay. It's a good point.
Winning, folks. And the bottom line is this too. When you start to consider, well, what could Universal do with this massive show building? I mean, the first thought that a lot of people have sort of suggested is putting a night bus attraction there. After all, you have the bus ride system already in place from Fast and Furious Supercharged. Why not reuse that and go with a night bus attraction? Let me just say this right now, folks. Do you not realize that the bus ride system is what got us in this mess to begin with? The ride system does not produce good rides, okay?
It's a good point. And they did this also with Kong, where it's these buses that have an animatronic driver and things. I've never been a fan of these rides where you have to see everything from the side screens and things. I don't like it in general how this is. Now, originally he's probably going to go into this. This was for, I think it was Earthquake, where you went down there and you were like in a subway tunnel and things would flood and things like that. But generally speaking, I don't really want to ride rides where I have to look over left or right. And if you're not in a good seat, like you miss most of it and things like that. So yeah, I would agree. Just scrap this whole ride system if you're going to go in here.
Skull Island Reign of Kong over an Islands of Adventure, it's a fine ride, but let's be honest, folks, that most of its great successes, which come from the sets and the massive King Kong animatronic, are not products of the ride system. If anything, the bus ride system is holding this attraction back. So I have no doubt.
It also has a great queue. At one point, it had scare actors in it, actually, when it first opened. But yeah, I think the queue in that is very underrated. But the ride, I do agree. The ride system, it definitely holds that ride back.
Out of my mind that Universal wants to stay very far away from that ride system for the rest of their existence. They don't want anything to do with that going forward. They know that that has been a complete disaster. But even if that's not how Universal feels and they're like, oh, actually, we do want to use that ride system again, keep in mind that that would be another screen-based heavy ride, which right now Harry Potter has 3 of and is soon going to get a 4th one on the way with Epic Universe. That's already too many screen-based Harry Potter rides. I don't think Universal has any intention of doing more of these, especially not in Diagon Alley, where the only 2 attractions are both screen-based. Do you really want that? I know you're excited about the idea of a night bus ride, but do you really want another screen-based attraction here? No, you don't, okay? So let's think about something else. Well, you could do an indoor roller coaster, certainly a big enough space for it. That's what a lot of people had hoped Fast and Furious would be when they were building over here. But again...
They also could do Fast and Furious coaster to replace Rip Ride Rocket, and then that would be probably the pretty good indication Supercharged is on its, last legs, if that was the case, because I don't imagine they're going to have 2 Fast and Furious attractions for very long if that were to happen.
We already have a roller coaster for Harry Potter. We already have an indoor roller coaster in Universal Studios Florida. And you could even argue that Gringotts is kind of an indoor roller coaster. So no, that's out. My thought, and this is just a slam dunk again all around, is an indoor dark ride. As things stand today, Every single Harry Potter ride has some level of intensity to it, with the exception of the Hogwarts Express. With Harry Potter being as big and as popular as it is, Universal really should look into getting a family-friendly ride that everyone can enjoy, whether it's your grandma or it's your 5-year-old nephew. Everyone can ride and enjoy it. And I think that's where a traditional dark ride makes the most sense.
I actually agree. I think it would be a good move for them. I think the only downside to it is, I think if you did this in Wizarding World and you had a ride that was, a dark ride that's for all all ages and things like that, I think inevitably there would be a big group of people that would be upset, because I think a lot of people are almost trained to think every new ride has to be some sort of e-ticket attraction. It has to be an amazing top of the line roller coaster or simulator or something like that. And even though a lot of people, if you ask about their favorite rides, they would say E.T. or dark rides over at Disney. But I think a lot of that is nostalgia, and they know it's great rides. But if those rides were announced today, I do think there'd be a lot of people that would push back and say they don't want it. I think it's a good idea. I think it would be a success, but I do wonder about the reaction to it, if that's what maybe would keep them from doing it.
Not to mention that Universal doesn't have a whole lot of family-friendly rides across their entire ride lineup at studios as things stand. Yes, they've been trying to move in that direction with VillainCon and DreamWorks Land, but really, the park is still largely not really well equipped to handle families with young kids.
It's true. I mean, our kids have, they're still young, but they're not like toddlers anymore. And the biggest complaint we ever had about Universal, it's gotten better, but there's never been a ton of things to do, especially on the studio side. On the island side, you got like Dr. Seuss. You got some stuff in the Marvel area that you can do. And there are some more things for kids over there. But yeah, on the studio side, there was not a lot when it came to kids.
Just not. But having a family-friendly ride in the Harry Potter land that everyone can enjoy would be such a slam dunk when it'd be so immensely popular. I can't even imagine what the crowds heading to this attraction would look like. They'd be absurd. And when I say traditional dark ride, I think we take it one step further and we say a boat dark ride. That'd be something completely unique in Universal's ride lineup and would be a perfect fit for Harry Potter. Think about the scene, of course, the iconic scene from the original movie where they are taking the boats up to Hogwarts. That is an iconic moment that I think would absolutely make sense to replicate in this ride. Again, keep in mind, the show building is massive, right? So not only is this ride going to be super long, right? There's a lot of space to be used here. So it would make sense that we could feasibly take a boat all the way over from Diagon Alley to Hogsmeade and Hogwarts. After all, of course, we also have magic involved here. So, I mean, you don't even have to really think about it too hard. But the other great thing about this building is that it's not just big lengthwise, it's also big height-wise. So Universal can build some absolutely massive sets in here that have absurd scale that can really just blow your mind. Outside of the iconic showing up to Hogwarts boat scene, I mean, it would be a cool idea. I mean, we kind of saw with the Tangled ride in Tokyo Disney, the way they've done that with that lantern scene. I mean, a boat ride's not a bad idea. I mean, maybe you could do it to a broom, maybe a dark ride on that front. But yeah, I mean, I think whatever they would put here would be successful. But I do think a Harry Potter dark ride that was like all ages, yeah, I do like that. Some other set pieces and some show scenes that this ride could be potentially going through a recreational Quidditch game being played above us. You can use lighting effects, screens, whatever you want to pull off that effect. I think also it makes sense to pass by the Weasley household and perhaps see a bunch of fireworks and stuff like that going off from the Weasleys, them pulling off their pranks and stuff like that. That can have some really cool pyrotechnics going on. Of course, relating back to that original iconic scene, I mean, we're going to be on the Great Lake for that scene. Of course, there are mer people in the water there. I think doing something with them, whether they come up above the water or maybe we go down into the water to interact with them would be cool. They've not been featured in any attraction up to this point. And I think a giant owlery, to go through a giant owlery, have all these owl animatronics overhead would be so cool, would be so sick. And I think it would just be an awesome, awe-inspiring moment for this attraction. You can also go ahead and bring us back to the Forbidden Forest and the Chamber of Secrets, which have already been featured on other attractions, but maybe go further into depth with those. Basically,
Chamber of Secrets would be a cool idea.
The goal here is to not only create a family-friendly attraction from the ride system point of view, but also a family-friendly attraction from the actual premise. So we're not going to have super dark themes like a lot of the other Harry Potter rides do currently have, right? Most of those take place towards the end of the series when we have that super dark tone and the Wizarding War is going on. Here, this is going to be more so relating back to the themes and the vibe and the tone of the original 2 films where we're all about magic and wonder, right? And there isn't any of that darkness. It's a much more lighter tone, and I think that would make more sense for a family-friendly attraction that, again, could really involve everyone and could be a hit across the board and across all age groups and could really be a huge win, not just for Studios Florida, but for the Orlando Resort in general, because it would make them a much better destination for families with young kids. But that's just my idea. What we do know is that a Diagon Alley expansion is coming. We kind of have an idea of when. We kind of have an idea of where. The question is what.
So yeah, again, a good video. I mean, he's got some good points. I've always assumed that it would take over the Fear Factor area just because it's right next to it. I never actually thought about it taking over Supercharged, but he does make he makes a solid point there. If you were to take that over, it does free you up for an entire new land there or more space if they do Pokemon in the the Simpsons area. I guess that would depend on how much room they want to take up if they are going to do the Pokemon land there. But I definitely think Simpsons is definitely going away. Now, the timing, I think I agree with him given the fact that, again, they were going to do a Ministry of Magic ride over there, and then it got moved to Epic Universe. You don't have, your next move doesn't have to be a Harry Potter ride because you already have a new Harry Potter attraction, which makes sense because they're already doing Rip Ride Rocket. So we already know, Universal is going to be aggressive even after Epic Universe, which I've been saying all along. I think they're for sure going to do that. I'm not going to be surprised one bit if they have maybe 1 to 2 more construction projects going on after Epic Universe is done, because again, they just completed an entire theme park. Universal builds quickly, and Universal obviously has the backing of Comcast, and Comcast is willing to spend a lot of money. And if they're already seeing an ROI from Epic Universe, they very may well just be like, hey, let's do 2-3 different things, do it at the same time, build it quick. Because I've often said, Disney announced the things that they announced at D23 and I don't think they're going to be ready until past 2028. Universal could already have 1, 2, I guess maybe even 3 attractions open and done before Disney gets done with the things they've already announced. So then Disney, their rebuttal to Epic Universe, they would have to then have another rebuttal to the new things that Universal is doing. Universal's ability to build quickly, for whatever reason that Disney either can't or won't do it, but Universal's ability to build quickly is a major asset for them. And if they're able to really go in here on the studio side and the Islands of Adventure side and get these lands updated along, closer to, say, an Epic Universe with all the new attendants, all the new people coming in for Epic Universe, you are really talking about this competition heating up even more, because a lot of people have said, well, Epic Universe is going to cannibalize the existing parks. It may to some level. I don't think it's near what some people have predicted or think it might be. But if you had brand new attractions, not only a brand new theme park, but you have brand new attractions in the existing parks, and then you go into the expansion paths into Epic Universe, and you do all this, let's say easily, but within a 7-year period, then you're talking, that is some major, major competition as you're talking about Disney and Universal, seeing where the attendance lines up after Epic Universe, how that all looks, how Disney stuff is received. But you're talking about this competition between Disney and Universal is only going to heat up. It's only going to keep going. Universal is not going to slow down. And I think his idea, at least here on Diagon Alley, is an interesting one. It could work. Just think, and I think a dark ride concept, given it's all ages, that's definitely something Universal could use. And I think with Harry Potter, there are a lot of younger kids that get into it, and maybe a lot of the rides are kind of, you do have Flight of the Hippogriff, which is a pretty tame kid coaster, but some of the rides are a little darker, and he's right, darker in nature. Ministry of Magic is going to be that way as well. It could give you more of an entry-level, family-friendly ride for the young ones who enjoy, just getting into Harry Potter, and that way you have something that basically all ages, all different types of families can enjoy there. It's a good idea. The space is big there, and Supercharged is just terrible. Like I said, Universal knows it's bad. I don't think I've ever seen a new ride be less well-received, maybe outside of Mission Space. Over at Epcot, maybe. That one's pretty panned as well. But I think he's got a good point here. I won't be surprised. Now, I'm not predicting this they'll do. I think most people think they would just go next door to where the Fear Factor stage is there. But the fact that they still do use that for Halloween Horror Nights is an asset to them on some level. So that may be one reason why they haven't done that, and they just decided to go over to Supercharged as well, and then get rid of one attraction. Maybe the new coaster is also Fast and Furious. You still have a Fast and Furious presence. You get rid of this ride, and they try and act like it never happened and bring in a brand new one there. It's definitely possible, but I think either way, you are definitely looking at things coming into the existing parks. I think Diagon Alley will get a new attraction, a new expansion, just because, like you said, they've done a lot of stuff on the Hogsmeade side, and there's still only one ride in Diagon Alley. And I love Diagon Alley. I mean, you just look at the movies, the way it looks. It's a great land. It's well themed. There's all sorts of little Easter eggs you can find in there. Obviously, places to eat and drink, but I do think they need to expand that area, have another offering there, and studios could use it as well. So I definitely think that's something that's coming. And with his idea, it's not a bad one. I don't a lot of times like predict types of rides. That's not really something I tend to do. So I'm not going to get into, like, I don't know if it would be a boat ride, whatever it would be, but I do think a dark ride on some level would make a lot of sense, not only for Harry Potter, but just for Universal in general, as they don't have a lot of those. But those do tend to age pretty well. If you look at E.T., you look at all the ones at Disney, dark rides are, they're easy to maintain. A lot of people can ride them. And, as time goes on, a lot of people do end up enjoying them, and they just kind of become a staple of a theme park many times. So, like I said, very good video here from Attraction Ideas. So I'm going to put a link in the description here. Go check out the video and their channel. They have a very good channel there, so go subscribe over there. And yeah, some pretty good ideas about what could be coming to Diagon Alley. By the way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And listen in the comments. Do you think it makes sense to move into Supercharged to expand Diagon Alley? Or do you think it makes more sense to move over into the Fear Factor area to expand Diagon Alley? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.